Welcome to another video about C1 exam preparation. My name's Paul, and today we're going to be looking at some key words that will be used in some parts of the exam, specifically use of English, part 2, and words such as although, however, nevertheless, and such like. Okay, so let's get straight to it. Okay, so it is these words here that we're going to have a look at today. You can see them here: although, though, even though, in spite of, despite, however, and nevertheless. Okay, now these words here essentially are used for contrast. Okay, the words that we have here at the top, okay, these are used for contrast within a sentence. Okay, so if you're writing about something and you're contrasting, essentially there will be two clauses within the sentence. We could use these words, okay, and we'll see sort of later on how they are slightly different in the way that they are structured in sort of language that's used, clauses that's used with them. However, and then nevertheless, are words that are used to contrast, but typically contrasting from separate sentences. So you might have a sentence and another sentence, and you would contrast those two sentences. Okay, so let's talk about these words here: although, though, even though. Okay, even though tends to be slightly more emphatic than although and though. Okay, they are all conjunctions. Okay, and they would typically begin adverbial clauses. Okay, an adverbial clause is words such as these. These are adverbs. Okay, and they will be used with a subject and a verb, and what would be called a dependent clause. Okay, dependent clauses are essentially things that stand by themselves, but they need something else to give them sense. Okay, so if we look here at our examples, we have here two sentences, okay, and these are adverbial clauses. For example, here, it was raining, okay, so we need sort of something else to sort of give it some sort of idea. So the sentence here: although it was raining, we decided to go to the beach. Okay, so we got two separate clauses. It was raining, we decided to go to the beach. And you're obviously contrasting this idea that if it was raining, why would you go to the beach? What would be the reason for that? Okay, so this is the reason here. Even though gives you this sort of idea, which is slightly more emphatic. Okay, so perhaps it's even stranger that even though it was raining, that this is what you decided to do and you went to the beach. Okay. Now, though tends to be slightly more informal. Perhaps you might use this perhaps more in speaking, and it could finish a sentence. Okay, although we would not use although to finish a sentence. Although typically would begin a sentence or perhaps would come in the middle. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to look at our next group of words here. We have the words here despite and in spite of. Now, these are actually prepositions, okay? And typically these will be used with a noun or even perhaps sort of a gerund, okay? So here, for example, you can see here, in spite of the rain, the noun, despite raining, okay? And we get exactly the same sort of idea as the previous sentences. We decided to go to the beach. So in spite of the rain, we decided to go to the beach. So you can see here how there's sort of slightly different structures between although, which required a verb clause, okay? And to these words here, which only need to use either, for example, here, a noun or a gerund, okay? In spite of, we could also use with the fact, okay? But in spite of the fact, if you wrote it like that, would go with what they call a sort of that clause, okay? And a that clause here, again, would have a subject and a verb. So in spite of the fact and although, you could say are very similar. Okay, so in spite of the fact that it was raining, we decided to go to the beach. Although it was raining, we decided to go to the beach. Okay, so again, contrasting clauses. Okay, so let's move on to the last set of words here: however and nevertheless. Okay, and we said here previously at the beginning that these were used to show contrast. but contrast between sentences, not within sentences, okay? And importantly here, it is going to be how you use them, but with punctuation. Punctuation will be important, okay? So within one sentence, okay, and typically the sentence really should be sort of two sentences, because this semicolon sort of acts almost like a new sentence. Let's take the second sentence first. The car was beautiful. However, okay, so here's our contrasting conjunction again. It was extremely fuel inefficient. Okay, so the contrast here being that the car is a beautiful car, but unfortunately it uses a lot of petrol. Okay, now if you use a sort of semicolon, which is almost like a sentence, a full stop. Okay, you can see here that after the semicolon it will be however, comma. It was extremely fuel inefficient. And again, with the separate sentences we've got here, the car was beautiful, full stop, however, comma, it was extremely fuel efficient. Okay. Nevertheless, slightly more emphatic than however. Okay. Okay, so I said at the beginning that these words were sort of important for particularly part two use of English, open, close. Okay, so what I've done here is I've taken some examples from part two, open, close. Okay, and we're going to show you how some of these words would appear within this text. Okay, so here we can see we have a text here about hedgehogs. Okay, it's a small mammal. Okay, sharp spines, etc., etc. And it's the answer here for number 9, which gives you the sort of contrasting element of these two clauses. Okay, so you've got the first clause here saying that it's found in many different parts of the world. Okay, and then the second clause here saying that it's that is not native to these two particular parts of the world. So even though it's found in many parts, it's not found in these parts. So here we have a contrast. And again, you can see two separate clauses. Okay, so although hedgehogs are found in many different parts of the world, none is native to either America or Australia. Okay, let's move on to another sentence. Okay, again from part 2, open, close. And you can see here, again, we've got sort of two separate clauses. Okay, the first clause here talking about that there were particular complications before the concert. Okay, but that the photographer was calm and unperturbed. Okay, so there were no problems. She was quite sort of relaxed. Okay, so although several complications arose before the concert began, Jane, your photographer, stayed calm and unperturbed. Okay, so very similar sort of idea, two contrasting sort of clauses here. And again, although used to join these two. Okay, now let's move on to another sentence with although. So again here, pedestrian crossing buttons are installed at most traffic lights. Many people ignore them, believing that pressing them, I think there has to be makes no difference. Okay, so it's the contrast here that they are installed in sort of many places. Okay, but most people here don't use them or ignore them. So although pedestrian crossing buttons are installed at most traffic lights, many people ignore them. Okay. Now we've got examples here as well with despite. Okay, so and here we can sort of see here, despite the fact that. Okay, so we had this word before. We had in spite of the fact that, but we could also say despite the fact that. So despite the fact that an intern may be only with you for a short time, they are still privy to the most innermost workings of your business. I said this would be probably off here. Okay, so this sort of contrast here between being in a company for a short time, but sort of knowing the secrets, if you like, innermost workings would sort of give you the sort of secrets of something. Okay, and then at the end, we can see here with however, and you can see here how the comma sort of gives us this idea of this word here, however, and it's the contrast between the panic among the teachers, okay, and that the children were fascinated by the bee catcher. So it was panic among the teachers because of many bees, but the children were quite fascinated, okay, and were not panicking. So here we have this contrast between the two sentences. So panic among the teachers, full stop. However, comma, Most of the children watch fascinated as the bee catcher rounded up, I think the phrasal verb here, the uninvited visitors. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I think it's worth sort of knowing these words. You'll find as you do sort of more of these sort of open close exercises, how common these sort of sentences are, however, though, even though. And also you can have these answers here with while and whilst. They would also work with these two contrasting clauses we've been talking about. So hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe and click the bell icon for new videos, and we'll see you another day. Thank you.